America is a strange country, and very few Americans are aware of this, at least until they travel overseas. Reverse culture shock is a very real thing, and I believe it disproportionately affects Americans because the average American is completely uninformed about what the rest of the world has to offer, so they don't even know how to measure America truly because they don't have any reference points. Bearing that in mind, in this video, I will be reacting to various videos of Americans realizing just how strange America actually is after living in Europe. So without further ado, let's get into this first video.
America, home of the SUVs. Here comes another.
Literally a row of SUVs. An entire row of SUVs. A lot of these are actually crossover SUVs. So you might be wondering, why are SUVs so popular in the USA? And I actually reacted to a video about why this is the case maybe a couple of months ago. So if you want to learn more about that, then you can watch this video right here. But if you don't want to watch that video, basically this is the reason why. The US SUV loophole refers to the regulatory advantage SUVs have over passenger cars, allowing automakers to sell larger, less fuel-efficient vehicles profitably by classifying them as light trucks to avoid stricter fuel economy and emission standard designs for cars. So, in other words, this is subsidized by the government. This right here is subsidized by the US government. And this creates induced demand because it's advantageous for the auto manufacturers to create these cars. They market them as the cars to want. And of course, people generally think in groups. So whenever it becomes the new status quo or the status symbol to have an SUV, naturally, subconsciously, people are going to want SUVs. So that's pretty much the main reason. And there are also concerns about safety on the road, and you want to have a bigger car with a bigger crumple zone. Truthfully, if you're crashing into another car at 80 or 100 kilometers an hour, you're probably done either way. I'm going to be honest with you. You're probably not going to survive that crash. And if you do, you'll never be the same again. So to me, that's not really that valid of a concern to have, especially when you consider that the traffic fatality rate in the US is significantly higher than most, if not all, European countries. But that's a different discussion for a different day. This right here was the first reverse culture shock that I personally had upon returning to the US when we landed at DFW Airport. And if you want to talk about big cars, try going to Texas. There's a saying, everything is bigger in Texas, even the idiots. And it's true. It is very, very true. People there love big stuff for whatever reason. And as we were walking through the airport, they had windows that allowed you to see into the parking garage. And oh my God, every single car in that parking garage was honestly even bigger than these cars right here. We're talking full-sized SUVs, Chevy Suburbans, Ford F-150s, F-250s, cars that didn't even really fit in the parking spots. Absolutely insane. On to the next video. So those stall gaps, that is absolutely insane. That was another culture shock that I had when using the public restrooms for the first time in the US, was they are very, very, how do I put this? Uncomfortable to use. Look at this gap right here. Look at this gap. Sometimes when you're walking past, oh my gosh, I hate this so much, but sometimes when you're walking past the stalls and you're trying to kind of see if any of them are available, you might glimpse through the crack, and you're not just trying to look at somebody as they're doing their business, but again, you're just trying to see if they're open, because sometimes the doors are closed, but there's no one in there. And you will see much more than you wanted to see. I'll just leave it at that. And sometimes you're on the receiving end of that as well. So again, very uncomfortable. Of course, the bathrooms are free in the US, generally speaking. I think it's illegal actually to charge for the public restrooms, but you get what you pay for, or I guess you get what you don't pay for. In Europe, you might have to pay for the public restrooms, but you would be hard pressed to find a public restroom that looks like this, with these kinds of stall gaps. That was actually the first culture shock I had when I left the US to go to Europe for the first time. Was I landed at Heathrow and I went in the bathroom and I was like, oh my gosh, I just have a whole private room to myself basically. So that let me know that Europe was operating on a different level right off the bat. On to the next video.
I just visited the US after being gone 11 months. That's the longest I've ever been outside the US. And here's some random things that stood out to me that I just noticed, that I would have never noticed before. Okay, so first up, the insistence on using plastic bags at supermarkets. Like, I went to grab a couple things from the store, and of course, plastic bags in my state are completely free.
So, I just looked at the license plates
and of course,
of those cars. Those look like Indiana license plates, I want to say. If you don't know, Indiana is basically a state in the middle of the US with a whole bunch of nothing in it. If you're from Indiana, I mean, no offense by saying this, but Indiana has a whole bunch of nothing. It is a flyover state, a drive-through state, so on and so forth. I'm sure there are great things out there. I just haven't seen them personally. And Indiana is one of those states that's probably a bit behind the curve. Kind of like Texas. And actually, even in a state like Illinois, with Chicago, one of the US's biggest cities, they still use those plastic bags as well. And I think I mentioned this in another video, but they will put the bare minimum in each bag. I'm talking about, let's say that green bag back there. It's not a super big bag, but we generally will pack it to the brim. We will pack it all the way to the top, as is the norm in Europe. In the US, when they bring those plastic bags, which oftentimes are free in much of the US, they will put 3 or 4 things in each bag. I'm talking about maybe a quarter of the way full, and you'll come out with 6 bags for an amount of items that probably could have fit into 2 of those bags.
of course, plastic bags in my state are completely free. There's no surcharge for using a plastic bag like there is here in the UK and a lot of places in Europe. And everyone around me, they're getting like one item, they're still getting a bag, they're putting it in a bag. And actually I was in this like little tiny remote town, one supermarket kind of town, and I got 2 things. I got a pack of granola bars and a piece of gum. And when I scanned those through, the lady was like, hey, would you like the gum left out of the bag? I was like, actually, I don't need a bag. Like, it's 2 things. I can just carry it out. Like, I'm not going to use a plastic bag just for 2 things. And this is something that really varies in the United States. Some states, they do have charges for bags. But in my small hometown, you better believe people are going to be taking those bags so they have something for their trash can.
That's very true. A lot of Americans do that for sure. They will use those plastic bags as trash bags, which incentivizes them to just get as many as they possibly can. And this is why in the US you'll just see these bags flying across the street sometimes, or stuck in trees and bushes. I never saw that in Europe. I don't think I ever saw one of those bags, because I don't even think they have them. They don't even have those bags in Europe, at least in the Netherlands. I don't know about other European countries. Evidently in the UK they don't have them either. But this is such a simple fix. This is something that is so simple for the stores to fix. Literally just stop using them and sell actual reusable bags. And you'll profit off of them. You'll profit off of them, you'll make more money, and you get to save the environment. Everybody wins.
Another thing, drug advertisements. If you ever doubt that there's a ton of pharmaceutical money in the United States, just turn on the TV and wait for an ad break. There will be a drug advertisement for some medication targeted at some 75-year-old for a disease that you've never heard of, and it just goes on and on and on.
To add on to this, not only will you have the drug ads, but you'll also have law ads. This is a big thing on billboards and on the radio. You'll always have somebody talking about, if you've been hit by an 18-wheeler, then call this number and get your money today or whatever. I feel like this creates an undercurrent of just stress in the US. People are constantly being bombarded by the pretense of a disaster that very likely hasn't happened in their lives yet. And it creates stress, it creates fear subconsciously because they're being marketed the notion that, hey, this can happen to you. This can happen to you. This will likely happen to you. And when it does happen to you, I will be the one to save you. Just wire the money into my account. The pharmaceutical ads are especially egregious though, because if you just Google what these ads typically look like, you'll see the B-roll footage of some happy family smiling on the beach and playing. The kids are jumping into the parents' arms and stuff like that. All of this wholesome stuff. And then at the end of the ad, they'll be like, might cause death, cancer, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea, so on and so forth. And they'll just sneak that in there like you're not supposed to notice or something. And it just makes no sense to me. It makes no sense. I've never felt compelled to go and purchase a pharmaceutical product from an ad that I've seen. Just never seen that. And it's weird because growing up in the US, you think this is normal, and then you find out that it's illegal to advertise medication. It's illegal to advertise pharmaceuticals in much of the rest of the developed world.
I remember as a kid watching like kid shows, and the commercial breaks would be drug ads because they know parents are watching. There is so much pharmaceutical money in the US, and the fact that they're able to advertise to the common man is just so weird. And there are always these really cheesy ads of people standing around and grilling at a barbecue while they list off 1,000 side effects on voiceover.
Just like I said, they'll have that wholesome B-roll footage, and then they will list out literal life-threatening side effects as if it's nothing. And it's so crazy because I never made the connection before that if a pharmaceutical, if a medication is necessary, you shouldn't have to find out about it in an advertisement. Your doctor will simply prescribe it to you. So basically, what's the point? What are they really trying to accomplish here? They're trying to trick people into purchasing medications that they don't actually need, which, in my opinion, is predatory.
For one thing that was surprising in a good way is just how nice and kind and humble people are. So there was a couple times I was going through the supermarket and somebody's shopping cart was kind of in the way and I had to squeeze past, or I was looking at something on the shelf and it was kind of in the way, and they were like running over. They were like, "Oh, I'm so sorry I left this in your way." Like on the West Coast where I've lived in Seattle, people might say sorry. They would say, "Oh, sorry," and move it. But like in my small hometown, people were like, "I'm so sorry I left this in your way. I'm so sorry, I'll move it." Like they were so profuse, and like they were like, "I'll get this out of your way. Sorry for the inconvenience." Like maybe not quite that profuse, but like they, were going on and on, not just a simple sorry. They were like, "Let me get this out of your way." And that was so shocking to me, especially.
Now let's see if they keep that same energy for someone who looks like me. Not trying to generalize here, but they already did the generalizing.
Where I've lived here in Oxford, and I think a lot of places in Europe, the supermarkets are pretty small, and so it's kind of expected that people are kind of standing in the way. Especially here in Oxford, I don't know if it's just a thing because students and young people, we tend to be a little bit unaware, but sometimes people just are like blocking the aisle, like straight up standing in the middle of the aisle, and you go up to them and you're like, sorry, excuse me, and they just ignore you, and you have to like push past. And
honestly, I just came up with a great idea. They should put bells on the shopping carts, kind of like on your bicycle. So whenever you're cycling and there's a group of kids cycling in front of you, taking up the whole bike lane, you ring the little bell and they disperse and they create a path for you. Why don't they have that on shopping carts as well? I feel like that would make things significantly more simple. I don't know.
And so coming back and then people being so like attentive and being like, "Oh my goodness, I'm in your way, possibly, maybe, might be in your way, let me get this out of your way right now so you can get by." It felt a little much. It felt like exaggerated. And I was like, you're fine, thank you, you're good. I was like, why are you? It's just a shopping cart.
Yeah, I do feel like Americans tend to display this hospitable energy, and sometimes it is genuine. There are genuinely good people in the US, believe it or not. But a lot of times you feel like, okay, what do you want from me? Why are you acting like this? And furthermore, you might be acting like this right now to my face, but when it's time to actually keep that same energy when you're voting, will you keep that same energy? And what we found out in the last election was that no. The vast majority of Americans, especially from these places that like to hang their hat on Southern hospitality, they're actually not very hospitable behind closed doors.